are back on FT Live from Borgata, two of us at least. Kratz in book mode. And Tim Healey joins us right now for the first time on Foul Territory, running on Stadium right now. Mets beat writer for a while for Newsday. You can follow him at Tim B. Healey on Twitter. Tim, great to see you. How you doing, man? Thanks for joining us.
I'm doing great. Thank you guys very much for having me.
Are you well rested and ready for an emotional roller coaster that will be the second half of the season in covering the New York Mets and also dealing with all of their fan base's highs and lows?
Well rested is always asking a bit much, but I am nothing if not ready for that because with the Mets, good or bad, that's always the case. Even during good seasons, it's one loss and the sky is falling, or a season like this, and Mets string a couple of wins together and the World Series is back on for the fan base. So one way or another, the Mets are going to make this interesting.
Hey, Tim, how you doing, bud?
I'm good, Todd. How are you? Long time no talk.
Yeah, breaking news. Did you hear?
I did not.
I just got traded back to the Mets.
it is that time of year, right?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. What is going to be the biggest factor for the Mets getting back into this playoff hunt?
Well, it's maybe not that interesting of an answer, but if their aces are not pitching like aces, then nothing is going to happen, right? Max Scherzer, Justin Verlander, they're old now. They've accomplished a ton. They're going to the Hall of Fame, but they haven't been their regular selves this year. When the Mets signed those guys, especially when they signed Verlander this past offseason, they were making a bet, a very expensive bet, that if and when those guys fall off and start to not be elite, it at least won't happen in the next year or two. Now, half a season isn't enough to say, okay, they're done now, they're toast, but it's an option on the table that maybe this is the beginning of a decline. That said, you don't want to doubt those guys, really. It was Scherzer's worst first half in more than a decade, and Verlander had a weird time because he had a rare injury, missed the first month. So if those guys can pitch like their Cy Young winning selves in the second half, then the Mets have a puncher's chance.
Did you have Tommy Pham as the leading OPS for the Mets at the AllStar break before the season started?
I absolutely did not. And, I didn't even have Tommy Pham as playing regularly in the outfield. When he signed with the Mets to be a backup outfielder, you could see him getting reps in really any of those spots because Canna, Nimmo, Marte were all kind of getting days off here and there. But for him to take over the way that he has, to hit the ball as hard as he does, what feels like, without exaggeration, every time, like the contact is loud. It's pretty unbelievable. He's one of the few, unfortunately for the Mets, one of the few best case scenarios that have played out for them on an individual basis this season.
Hey, question for you. You put up a couple days ago, you liked the home field advantage for the All-Star game. The winner would get home field advantage. Now, hear me out a second. So I don't like it personally just from being a player in it. Guys go there, we're trying to have fun, all that kind of stuff. You see what you wrote. I like the one that decided home field advantage for the World Series. Maybe it's a generational thing. Yeah, some things come, some things go. But now my question to you would be is, if that was the case, would you change your mind on some All-Star selections? Would you bring a guy like Ellie De La Cruz into the All-Star game, or would you keep what the fans picked and what everybody else picked?
Well, I don't think the fan vote is going anywhere for the starters because MLB loves that, gets the fans engaged. And are there some whiffs there? Absolutely, yes. But, I don't know that I have a truly logical take on why the All-Star game should decide home field advantage for the World Series. Frankly, it's not logical. It's sentimental. That's because when I was growing up, that's the way it was. And that was a fun little thing that when the World Series eventually did roll around, you would think, oh yeah, who won this year? And of course, it was always the American League, almost always. So it was just a fun little piece of something. I don't expect it to come back. I don't think there necessarily is a good reason for it to come back. I think it's fine that the way they do it now, because as you said, for the players who are involved, it's not the best setup.
I mean, are we going to tie the home run derby to something then too? So are we going to are we going to switch? How would you switch the home run derby so that it's not just an absolute ADD fest of just watching a ball? Wow, hey, what's going on?
I like the format of the 10 outs, where if, 10 non-home runs and then you're done. And as many home runs as you hit before then you're good to go. Like that Josh Hamilton round at Yankee Stadium that year. Granted, that would rob us of moments like Todd's when you hit walk-offs as the buzzer's about to go off, which those are pretty sweet too. But watching this year, you can't really appreciate the gloriousness of the especially long balls, it felt like, because you're trying to watch the next pitch and the camera angles, it's like picture in picture. And it was just, as you said, an ADD fest. There was a lot going on, just broadcast wise.
Yeah, I think personally, since being part of it, watching on TV, I'm like, man, I want to see the ball land. And that was the, I guess, frustrating part for me. I like to see how far it goes. I like to see how it lands. But I want to switch gears real quick. You've been with the Mets for how long now?
This is season number 6 already.
Nice. It seems like, I don't know why, I feel like you've been there for 16 years. But,
Mets
I guess
years.
from knowing you for all that time. But is there a memorable moment for you? I know we had that conversation back in the day where I was confused that none of you guys are Mets fans. So now I understand. Not all beat writers are Mets fans, as we talk about. Mm-hmm. Is there a moment that you sat back and like, wow, this is pretty cool? Like one memorable moment from watching them?
Yes. I mean, no, I'm not a Mets fan. You're right. But don't get me wrong. There are a lot of times where I sit back and get to appreciate the fact that, holy crap, this is my job. I'm getting paid to watch this and write about this. David Wright's last game has got to be right at the top of that list. A lot of random Jacob deGrom games, especially during his Cy Young seasons, are on that list where you just get to kind of take it in and appreciate greatness as it's happening. Pete Alonso's home run to break the rookie record to beat Aaron Judge by 1 near the end of the 2019 season. That was really cool. And then there were things like last year, the Mets, when they clinched a playoff spot and they had a subtle, low-key celebration in Milwaukee. That was a lot of fun. I was not there for their combined no-hitter last year, so I had some FOMO that night for sure. But as I kind of said earlier, even when things are going so-so for the Mets, there's going to be moments that are a lot of fun.
Talk about things going so-so for the Mets. Who is the most to blame? Because you can't blame the players because the players are the best. They never make mistakes. This is a player-centric show. Who's the most to blame? Buck, Billy Epler, Steve Cohen, or the Mets will just Met?
The fourth one is tempting, but feels like a cop out. I would not put the most blame on Buck Showalter because I think in general managers get too much credit when things go well and too much blame when things don't go well. So I'm not inclined to cite him. And likewise, Steve Cohen, it's hard to blame because he greenlit this gigantic payroll, the highest in the history of baseball. So I think that leaves you with Billy Epler. He spent a lot of money, made a lot of good moves, brought in a lot of good players, but left some holes. He did not go for it at the trade deadline last year, which set the tone this offseason. And for all that they did this past offseason, they didn't upgrade at DH or didn't add any bat really, which was an obvious need. They could have used another solid reliever or two and did not. I understand the longer-term approach of trying to build a farm system, wanting to develop players from within, because that's how they can sustain winning, which is all any organization wants. But I think back to last trade deadline a lot because that was one of the best teams in the history of the Mets in the regular season. And timeline be damned, prospects be damned, sometimes you just got to go for it because it's right there in front of you and you didn't really expect that to win 100+ games. So I think they missed that opportunity. And, depending on what happens the next few years for the Mets, they might really, really, regret not going for it there.
Okay, say the Mets start getting back into it. We heard about Edwin Diaz throwing a little bit. Could we see him at the end of the year, maybe, or just depends on where they're at?
I would think it depends on where they're at. They initially said at the time of Edwin Diaz's injury, it's going to take 7 months, which brings you to November. But there were, or 8 months, which brings you to November. But there were cases, Billy Epler said at the time, of it taking 6 months, which is September, which is in play for the end of the regular season, for the playoffs. Where he's at right now, we just don't know. He's throwing in the outfield regularly. He's not long since dumped the crutches to help him walk. So it seems like things are going really well. But is it worth bringing him back? I think about it this way. If the Mets were in it the whole year, is it worth bringing back your excellent closer after that injury to put him in that sort of situation? I think it's a little bit of a toss-up. Is it worth bringing him back if you're on the very fringes, or you have sort of have a shot at the playoffs in the second half of September? That might be a tough sell. But it depends on how his rehab goes between now and then.
So we don't know where Edwin Diaz is going to be. Is Max Scherzer going to be on the roster on August 2nd?
I really think he is. Steve Cohen has this thing about paying down salaries to get other teams to take players and get better prospects in return. And if he took that to the extreme in the case of Scherzer or Verlander and their record $43.3 million salaries, that would be pretty fascinating to pay that much money for a player to play for another team. That said, between Scherzer's middling performance and his salary next year, I think, the Mets are going to keep him. And a big part of that is because the Mets want to be good in 2024, no matter what happens this year. And if you trade Scherzer, then all of a sudden you leave yourself with another gigantic hole that you're unable to fill internally, that you then have to go spend another ton of money to fill over the offseason.
Tim, give me a clubhouse vibes check on the Mets. How different is it this year versus last year? And also the balance of winning cures all.
The balance of what?
The balance of winning cures all, right? I mean, obviously most clubhouses well.
Yeah. I mean, chemistry is important, but winning tends to introduce quite a bit of chemistry, of course, right? Even if you don't like your coworkers in theory, winning will cover a lot of that. As far as tone of the clubhouse, it's about what you'd expect. I think of Pete Alonso, who is as happy and upbeat as a guy as there is a lot of years. And this year, team-wise, and also him personally in June, he was going through it performance-wise. He's not his same upbeat self. And it was interesting to hear when the Giants came to Citi Field a couple weekends ago, J.D. Davis expressed a similar sentiment that Davis, former teammate, of course, played a bunch of years with Pete, got to first base and was just making small talk, chit-chatting, and Pete wasn't really having it. So, they have their pool table, they have their ping pong table, which actually disappeared near the end of the first half. So they seem to get along. They are taking it one day at a time, like they say, but there's nothing that can have the same effect as winning. And we saw that when they had a little 6-game winning streak last week. And, all of a sudden things start to feel much better. So winning cures all, like you said, but the tone of the clubhouse is about what you'd expect for a team that expected greatness and has been under 500 for more than a month.
Did you start to see this last year in the second half? As not that they played awful, but the Braves started overtaking them. Was there some kind of oh no, kind of woe is us kind of attitude, or is it just a new thing this year?
I'd say that's a new thing this year. Last year, for as great as the Braves were, and they had an incredible run, the Mets still won 101 games and finished with the same record as the Braves. They lost the division on the tiebreaker, but, the worst moment of last year before the playoffs obviously was getting swept by Atlanta in Atlanta to effectively lose the division. They choked it away, and so does that have a hangover effect coming into this season? I'd be surprised. I think the better, the more possible idea is that as excellent as the Mets were last year, they were inevitably going to regress a little bit coming into this year. So if you have their true talent level somewhere here, and last year they played way above, not way above, but 5 or 6 wins above. And this year they've been 5 or 6 wins below, then you can see how in reality they're a low to mid 90s win team. They just overshot last year, and so far this year they're undershooting.
So they're a 2-year 90+ win team if you combine the 2 years together.
Yeah, exactly. And unfortunately for them, it might end up with them ending up with nothing unless they go on a run here.
Right. Who do you think is the best team in the NL East besides the Braves? I'm not giving you any easy ones.
That's tough because I watched the Marlins for a long time and they always are unwatchable. So that they're so good this year is, I'm happy for them and their fan base, but I keep expecting it to not continue. So best team in the division besides the Braves, I'm going to go Phillies. They were in the World Series. They have a lot of good players, a lot of whom were not playing up to par in the first half. It's sort of depressing to watch Trey Turner not be that good because he's been so electric to watch in recent years. So I'm going to go Braves, of course, at the top, and then Phillies, I would say, are number 2.
Do you update your Twitter bio pretty frequently?
Not very frequently, but I did update it a couple of weeks ago because I'm running a marathon for charity. So if anybody wants to go look, they can check out my Twitter bio.
That is what I was going to ask you. Now you're running for charity, but I feel like your energy, what's your time going to be? What are you going to run it in?
I am very much a normal, non-athletic person. So to me, finishing is the accomplishment. But if I can finish in like 4:15, 4:30, that would be a win for me.
And what miles are you on right now? You're training for it. Where are you at?
So I'm on an 18-week program, and this is week 2. So I am running 7 miles tomorrow. That's going to be not my highest lately, but that's where I'm at right now. It's a slow build. It's like spring training.
And Kratzy definitely got his miles in already this morning. I feel like the energy's there, right, Tim?
Yeah. You can feel it.
Nice. I like it. Hey, Tim, great catching up with you. Appreciate you coming on, and enjoy the emotional roller coaster ride that's about to begin again tonight.
Always do. Thank you guys very much for having me.
Thank you. That's Tim Healey. Give him a follow on Twitter at Tim B. Healey. He writes for Newsday, covering the Mets.